I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet? What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Big Money Siege has traded in the sunglasses from Florida for earbuds. It looks like you're ready to go on a run. It looks like as soon as this is done, you are about to go on a run somewhere.
It's actually true. That is what's happening. Because I didn't get up early enough to do it before the pod today, so I got to do it after.
Okay, but to be clear, you're going outside to do this, and you're not going on a treadmill, as some of the Overdrive boys were making fun of you for, right? Yeah,
this will be an outdoor run. I will say this. Obviously, we've talked a number of times about the run streak. You know, usually when people find out about it, they say like, "Oh wow, I can't believe you did that," or something. Like I've never had pushback, but I did it hit on Friday night with Overdrive. And they were giving me pushback. They were trying to say because some of the runs over 1,000+ days have been done on a treadmill, it shouldn't count. The way they likened it to, actually, Julian, they said it'd be like if you went to a golf simulator. You don't say to your buddies, "Hey, I went golfing today," which I think is a flawed argument. But
it is.
Because it's not, you still, trust me, I still sweat like crazy on a treadmill. I mean, I acknowledge it is easier to run on a treadmill indoors when it's -30 in Canada. So like there are days I've run on a treadmill when it's easier than what it would be to go outside. And sometimes too, when you're in another city, you don't really know where you're going. You have a small window of time. It's just easier to go to the hotel gym to do the run. So instead of figuring out a route and maybe getting lost. So like I'd say 94% of the runs during my streak have been outdoors, but there are some that have been done on the treadmill.
Yeah. So look, I'm not someone who runs regularly. You are not going to get any judgment from me on how you go about your run streak. So the fact that you're still able to do this and we are past 1,000 days is beyond impressive. I know we got to get to hockey stuff, but we got to mention that.
I just love that I'm getting chirped by the Overdrive guys. Like you just go on that show knowing something's coming. Like it's always out of left field. Like I'm telling you, that's the last thing I thought they would be, going in on me for. It was a funny conversation.
I gotta say, the fact that the Overdrive, for context, for those who are not in Canada, the Overdrive show on TSN 1050 with Jeff O'Neill, Jamie McLennan, and Brian Hayes, obviously national, based out of that radio station, but you can watch on TSN as well, I believe nationally. One of the best Canadian sports shows that we have. So the fact that CJ gets that placement on that show, I mean, that is no small feat, my friend.
Right. But when you go there, they might even take what one of your accomplishments and turn it on its head against you. You never know.
Yeah, just ridiculous. Anyway, good on that, but good on the run when you get a chance. But I want to talk about Florida and the All-Star weekend that you were at. We're going to talk about the playoff format. We'll get to sports interaction. We're going to look at some teams that have done some things with their cap space. And of course, it's Monday, so we'll get to ask CJ. But I want to ask you about your impressions of the All-Star weekend in Florida. You were in the building. You saw the events. You saw the players. Take me through it. What were your impressions, man? How was it?
Well, let it be said, I came away able to make a statement that not too many people associated with the event could make. I did not visit the elbow room once while down there. And
such restraint.
Everyone from media members to players in the game to agents, I'm sure fans that were down for the event can not make that statement because from what I heard, it was pretty wild. I won't name names, but there was a lot of fun to be had in there. So I did avoid that. I'll tell you, I actually love the weekend, honestly. And I think if you just consume it on, in the context of watching the skills competition, went on a little too long. I would say that's definitely, the pacing wasn't great for that. And then if you watch the 3-on-3 tournament, like if that's all you see, I understand the hate. Like I do, there's an understanding at the high levels of the NHL that they have to keep working to try to find ways to breathe some life into it, to shake it up. I know we've chopped that around a bunch in the past. But like the actual weekend itself is awesome. Like the players are so relaxed. I don't know. Everyone just has a good time. Like I think you do need a break in your season, and I don't have the answer honestly. What's has to happen? I mean, this is what it comes down to for me. The performers have to want to perform, and right now I don't think they do. Like it's hard to just get the players caring or putting out a little extra effort when you're talking about whether it's the skills or the game. If there's a way to do that, I'm all for it. I would highly suggest to you that when we get to Toronto next year for the All-Star weekend, it's going to look quite a bit different. I think that they're going to, go back to the drawing board, watch what happened here, brainstorm ideas and at least give it another shot somewhere else. But even if the game kind of stinks and, it drags on too long on Friday, I still think it's worth doing. There's a ton of league partners down at this event. As I mentioned, it's a big business weekend. NHL owners were in the building. You got families of the players. Like it's kind of like I've said about the draft. It's hockey's version of a conference, industry sort of conference. Those two events are the times probably where the most number of people from all aspects that around the league or league adjacent get together. And so, it was cool. And I think it'll be neat in Toronto. I mean, part of obviously what we all liked in Florida, we literally had a media day availability, Julian, beside the ocean, outdoors. Like it was so unique. Like it was cool. Obviously in Toronto in February 2024, we're gonna be somewhere where there's heating, so we won't be there. We won't be outside on on the top of the CN Tower, I don't think. But I think it's still being such a hockey city, like it works in different venues, and so I still think the weekend's worth doing. Let's reboot it a little bit, but I'm not going to kick it around too much either because I had a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of value seeing players, seeing people again, and I come away going like, yeah, that was a fun few days.
Okay, let's put the Toronto portion of this on the side for a second. You did mention Toronto because it was announced that next year's All-Star game will be in Toronto. I gotta say something about the weekend. The games itself, okay, pretty much like what we've seen in the past with the 3-on-3. The jerseys are incredible. I ordered the Eastern Conference one, the one with the black top and then the white bottom. Like I love that jersey. It's coming in a few days. The skills competition.
Did you get a name on it?
I didn't get a name on it. I'm not gonna put a name on it. It's probably fair I just keep it blank. I need to say something about that Friday because as someone who watched it off their iPad, actually from the comfort of their own home, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Can you think of any other year where they've had skills where they start an event and then they stop and they go to another one and they go to another one and they don't finish them? Like, it's one thing about, like, we can get to the level of effort and how much the players wanted to get into it, which I think in the breakaway competition, you saw that more than anything else. But like, I hated the idea of them starting an event and then not finishing it and then thinking, okay, we'll just get back to it later in the night. That's not how you do it. Just go to the event, go through it, finish it all the way through and do that. That's a big thing. Also in terms of players caring.
That's a TV thing though. That wasn't the NHL. Like that, my understanding, that's what ESPN wanted to do.
And
it's a new league
partner.
It's a new, I don't think that, I'm pretty confident that won't happen again. Like I think
yes.
In some of the conversations I had on the ground, again, with people that can affect this, they recognize in real time that didn't work. And they haven't even had a chance to really decompress from it. But I think that was a TV decision. And yeah, it didn't work. Like just have 5 or 6 or however many competitors go fastest around the rink and tell me who's the fastest. Because I actually think those events work. Sometimes the more gimmicky ones, like you're like, what is the rules here? What is it? Like, it's pretty clear when you watch someone skate around that you're just trying to see who's fastest or even the hardest shot. Pretty obvious what you're measuring. And I think that those have historically been some cool events because when you see Zdeno Chara take a slap shot on the hardest shot, like you want to see what the number is. Like it's cool, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the simpler, the better for these events. Also in terms of players caring, it's kind of funny. I got the sense maybe Connor McDavid cared, at least in the conversation he had with Kevin Bieksa before it started, where he was saying, you know what, let some of the other younger guys do some of the events like fastest skater, and he does the accuracy competition, and that works out well. Like, it would have been cool if Connor was in the breakaway competition, right? And maybe he doesn't do all the fancy costume stuff, but he goes in on a loan and makes this sick move. That's what that particular competition should be like. That should be the NHL's equivalent. And I'm not saying it's anywhere close. It should be the equivalent of the slam dunk competition in the NBA, where everyone comes away from that, where the players are doing something really cool that we should be talking about for a long time. But just for whatever reason this year, they kind of mangled it in how they showed each player after every few minutes, and they focused more on the costumes, minus Sydney and Ovechkin and Sergei Ovechkin, which was cute, mind you. But they focused on that more than actually trying to do something cool in terms of an actual cool goal.
Right.
And I feel like
how is Trevor Zegras not here again?
Did you see the tweet he put up?
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but he literally scored that breakaway he scored in last year's All-Star game was crazy.
Yes,
with the blindfold and everything, and the fact he should have won. That was the other thing. He didn't win last year somehow, which is its own. I guess maybe that's why they don't have him back. But it's he flew in just to do that one move, and it worked. To me, you got to bring him back and see what else he can do. Clearly, he's got a bag of tricks that very few players have in terms of just some of those crazy individual moves.
Seriously, it doesn't make sense to me. For context, for those who didn't see, as the event was going on, Trevor Zegras just put up a yawning emoji, a sleeping emoji. It was that just tells you all you need to know about how that went. The highlight of that, honestly, was Sarah Nurse's Forsberg goal. She deserves a lot of praise for that. That was an amazing moment.
Awesome. I mean, this is what I mean. There's something in there. I don't think I'm not in the everything needs to be scrapped and let's just forget it. I got that morning, Julian, of the game, the league puts out a daily media email, and then it said the 67th ever All-Star game. That kind of hit me because I wouldn't have known that number. But it's been done for a long, long time. I know it's been done in a million different formats. There's no real historical precedent. But I think the fact you have an event that's been held 67 times in a league's history, I think you do continue on with it. You just got to try to really accentuate the good and weed out the bad. And I don't know. The thing is, players want to go now. The story, I remember early in my career, always the story you get there is all these stars who don't want to be there. That was not the case. Obviously, a few players had to pull out, but it's all legitimate injuries in those cases. Even Rasmus Dahlin, gets added. His teammate Tage Thompson gets injured the night before, and then he flies on a moment's notice to go. I think the players want to be there. We just have to give them some carrot to really make it cool. But work in progress.
Last thing before we bring on David Bastel. Toronto, next year, 2024. You mentioned the fact that maybe they do need to go back to the drawing board for some things. Is there any added pressure for the league for them to have a great weekend considering the location of the All-Star game? Does that matter in all of this?
I haven't thought about it, but I think it's fair to say that. One thing that's interesting about Toronto is, they have huge fan base interest, right? They have a massive season ticket list. I'm sure whatever the cost is, it's going to be high. And so I think that there's pressure to put on a good show. Because the one thing I'll say too, being in the arena, especially for the skills, when they had all those taped events, I actually kind of found the golf thing pretty funny when the players were out golfing with their gloves on and all that. And of course they had the dunk tank and some other events, but those, when you're in the rink, you're just watching it on TV, right? Because those were pre-taped. And so I feel for some of the people that were in the building, it might not have been the best experience that way. You're just sitting there watching the scoreboard. I don't know. It's so yeah, I think there's some pressure there. And the other thing too, it depends on the market. There wasn't a lot of juice in the building. It didn't feel, but we'll see what the crowd is like in Toronto. Maybe there'll be a little bit more energy, atmosphere, which might spur on the performers. I don't know, but yeah, there's definitely some pressure there. And really, the only reason it's going to Toronto, or the main reason, is this was supposed to be when a World Cup was held. That window in February 2024. If you remember, it was only late 2022 they had to abandon plans. To go there. So we're talking 3 months ago or 2.5 months ago. And so, typically these events take years of planning out. I've been told they actually have the cities identified for 2025 and 2026. They haven't signed all the agreements. Obviously, they haven't made any announcements, but the NHL knows where it's going already for the next two, way beyond 2024. But they needed to place on a moment's notice that has, the hotel space that can be grabbed, convention center space for the events they have there. And, where they're confident, I think that it will work, that there'll be fans and all that without a lot of advanced marketing. So Toronto actually entered the equation quite late, and it was only November. They're like, oh crap, we're not having a World Cup in 2024. Now we got an All-Star game that hasn't been on the horizon. So, this one's being, again, it doesn't seem like it's short notice because it's still a year and a little bit of time from when they started doing it. But, I think that there is some pressure to get it right, given the market. There'll be more media attention in Canada anyway. I mean, because most of us won't have to fly anywhere. I'm going to sleep in my own bed those nights.
Jeez.
Which will be a little different. I wasn't around as a working member of the media yet in 2000 when the game was last in Toronto.
I was 6 years old.
I
Right.
was in high school.
Oh boy. The time, if you could tell us in 2000 what we'd be doing in 2023, I'm not sure we'd be able to tell you what a podcast was.
No, but I was hell-bent on being a hockey writer by then. So
yeah, I think I knew by then, by 6, that I wanted to do something with sports writing. So yeah, we were both well on our way. Both well on our way in the year of our Lord 2000. Anyway, let's get on DB, and we will talk about a very big talking point that emerged from this weekend's NHL All-Star Weekend.
You can bet that with David Bastel. Brought to you by Sports Interaction. Get in the action and make a play. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Sports Interactions. You can bet that with Sports Interactions' very own David Bastel. Hope you had a good weekend, buddy.
Pretty good, guys. How are things over there?
Things are good. This is another one of those episodes where CJ and I are in different cities than where we normally reside. So that's why you can tell the backgrounds are a little bit different. But remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. As of right now, we're recording this on Monday morning for February 6th. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in a playoff position as we speak. The Winnipeg Jets, your Winnipeg Jets, David Bastel, are in a playoff position as we speak. And Edmonton holds down a wildcard spot, and Calgary is tied with Colorado on points for the second wildcard spot. So you could say four Canadian teams are in a playoff position right now. Sports Interaction is asking the question, how many Canadian teams make the playoffs? Over 3.5 is at 1.77, under 3.5, 1.93 DB. How do you see it?
You know what? That's the debate, right? We're looking at 4 teams. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to take any flyers on Ottawa, Montreal, or the Vancouver Canucks. It hasn't been, point productive seasons, let's just say. So I don't know about you, CJ, but I'd love to see both Alberta teams in this postseason and see what happens. I know by most people's standards, Calgary probably hasn't performed like a lot of people thought they would. I think they would probably be in a conversation of should have been ahead of Seattle, but no disrespect to the Kraken. They've had a very good season and sitting nicely in the Pacific. But I think we're going to see 4 teams somehow in this postseason. But you know what? That's why we debate about it, right? We have 3, possibly 4, and I don't know what. How are you looking at it right now yourself?
It's a nail biter. I mean, I'm stunned we're this deep in, and both Calgary and Edmonton really haven't secured their spot. I know Edmonton had a really strong run into the All-Star break, so they put a little distance in between themselves and that. But I think it'll go right down to the wire, and I'm with you. It's nice to see 4 Canadian teams in there. I love seeing Edmonton and Calgary play each other last year in the playoffs. I'd probably lean towards 4, quite honestly. I wonder if LA can hang on with the goaltending they have. I just think it's going to be a close race, and I don't see either team selling parts or anything like that. I think they're all into this is a season both have to get in, so I think they're going to find a way.
Should mention Calgary again as we're recording this, 6 points out of top spot in the Pacific, which, as you mentioned, LA, Seattle and LA tied at 63 points. Vegas only a point behind. It is very tight in the Pacific Division, gentlemen. So, I mean, we could easily see those 4 teams make it, considering Winnipeg's in a good spot. The Toronto Maple Leafs obviously in a good spot. But yeah, the Oilers and the Flames look like the 2 Canadian teams that will be fighting like hell to make the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing them jump over each other for the next 30 odd games or so. DB, thank you so much for joining us as always. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. See you Thursday.
Thanks, fellas.
Our next partner is Athletic Greens. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens literally every day. I gave AG1 a try because I wanted better gut health, sustained energy, immune system to be better, support as well for that. I just can't stand taking all these different pills and vitamins all the time. And I wanted something that actually tastes pretty good. And AG1 has all of that. In the morning, I could take it before I eat breakfast. Some people have to take it before they work out, making coffee. You literally could just start your day off with AG1, and it can help you feel unstoppable, ready to take on your day, ready to go out, ready just to do something good for your body, because you can't just keep putting crap in it all the time. It's not good. It needs vitamins and nutrients to survive. Seriously. And thanks to AG1, they're able to provide a whole bunch of different high quality ingredients. In fact, 75 of them actually, that give you long-term gut health support, a whole bunch of different nutrients that can help you get to that point. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/Johnston, athleticgreens.com/Johnston to get yourself a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Check it out. I should mention, Siege, before we get to all the fun hockey stuff, we have the fourth and final $100 gift card from Beer Town to give away. The question we asked was, which fast food restaurant did CJ work at once upon a time? And Siege, last episode, you said it was going to be a bit difficult for plenty of people to get the answer. I don't think the answer was as difficult as you thought it would be.
Do you know what is so weird? It's
What?
just not weird. This is like one of the most surreal moments of the entire weekend is, if you remember, I mentioned when I was at the Board of Governors meeting that a minority owner of one of the teams came up and said he likes the pod. Well, I happened to run into the same individual again at the arena before the 3-on-3 tournament on Saturday. And he comes up to me and he goes, the answer's Wendy's, right?
No way.
Yeah. So there's someone who has an ownership stake in an NHL team that not only listens to our show, but is engaged and remembered enough about the contest and knew the answer somehow. So again, I'm not gonna dox the person, but if you're listening, I'm blown away. Like that sort of stuff makes my day. He also mentioned, I should say too, he goes, crazy week, huh? Brad Marchand and Steve Dangle going at it on Twitter.
Oh my God.
So, like sometimes you feel like you're operating in our own little vacuum, or, obviously I know we have our SDPN community, lots of people that are super engaged, super involved, submit questions, come out to the live events, all that stuff. But like, you just don't expect someone who has amassed more wealth than we can ever imagine and owns part of a sports team and all that is involved in our world too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention that name either, but when I was told of their qualifications, my mind was completely blown. Unfortunately to that person, they did not tweet at my Twitter handle or Chris's Twitter handle or the SDPN Sports Twitter handle that answer, so they are not eligible for this contest. But Aaron Manton did, and he wrote, CJ worked at and was named Employee of the Month at Wendy's, and he is the winner of our fourth and final $100 gift card from Beer Town. We're going to try to make sure that we get gift cards out to all of our winners. Thank you to everyone who participated in the giveaway, in the contest. Thank you for everyone who tweeted at us and tried their hand at winning one of them bad boys. So we really appreciate it. This was really great to do.
Yeah, remember white, red, green, Julian. Mayonnaise, ketchup, pickles, onion, tomato, lettuce, and then you finish with the mustard. And I didn't put this in last week because it would have ruined the answer. But you do a mustard W on the burger or on the cheese patty if it's on the cheese if it's on the burger. If you do that, you can make sandwiches there. Do they do the 4-corner press when you do the grill? Because Wendy's doesn't cut corners. They got the 4-corner press.
No, sir.
I'm telling you, I could still go back if I had to. Like if you could, I guarantee you could throw me on a shift right now and I could hold my own without any training. The problem is they probably have some new burgers that I don't know exactly how to make. But
wow,
anyway.
That is amazing. Chris Johnston, the fry cook. I love this. And I also love everyone who competed.
Did I ever tell you the drive-through story?
No. Tell me the drive-through story.
So a lot of my shifts for a period of time, I worked there for years, so I did everything over my time there. But I was doing a lot of drive-through at one period. And when you do the drive-through there, you have to do the dishes at the same time. So and there's more dishes than you think. So you got to stay on top of the dishes on the drive-through. But anyway, they installed a clock. They installed a clock at one point for the drive-through. And basically the minute someone's car pulls up to the order part, and then when they leave, it would time, how long it took people to go through. And so, we were degenerate high school students, and we had like a dolly, like a metal dolly to like lift heavy things. We discovered that if you walk the metal dolly through the drive-through, it actually registered like a car went through. And so late at night, because they were, there's a lot of pressure on whatever the number, I don't remember what a good time was, but there was like time thresholds that they were measuring us on. And so then we realized that you could just run through the drive-through with the dolly and like bring down the average. Because all of a sudden you'd have like, there'd be a few 12-second trips instead of a minute and a half. And we started doing that enough that at one point in time, our Wendy's had the best drive-through times in all of Canada.
What?
And the problem with that was I think they were like, oh, wow, what is this one Wendy's doing? and like one of the managers like looked through the log or whatever and found out that we were just greasing it at the end of the night, just all these 10-second trips.
Oh my
So
God.
it was good for a time because we were bringing our average down, everyone was happy, and then we got too good and we got busted. So that's a real story. I don't think I was the ringleader behind it, but I was definitely involved.
Dog. sorry. That was y'all dumbass kids.
Oh, we were so dumb. So dumb.
Oh,
but
shit.
the thing was that we actually weren't trying to show off. We were trying, like, our motivation was not to get in trouble, right?
No,
our motivation was just trying to bring the average down so that they weren't like, why is this drive-through so crappy?
Yeah.
And then we got too good, and we got on the radar for the wrong reasons.
How was it letting them know that, like, oh yeah, we like ran through this metal thing and that's what brought the average down?
Well, that's what I told you earlier. Like, I got written up once reading a candy cane while at work. So like, my point is like that in the context of the moment, that was all normal stuff to like get in trouble for. Like, like they were half babysitting us, half employing us, right? Essentially. I mean, it was mostly because I work nights because I was going to school during the days. Yeah. During the days, there was more adults that worked there, but like at night, it was basically all of us high school students, doing all that crap. Anyway.
I feel like you would do something bad, and then like your boss would just kind of look around and just be like, "Oh, crazy CJ."
Well, again, it wasn't just me. That was a systemic thing that rooted up in the Coburg Wendy's back in like 1999 or whatever year that would have been.
Still, anyway, thank you for that story. That was really great. It's time to talk about the NHL playoff format.
I don't know why I just remembered it right now. It just like crossed my mind.
Yeah, right. We have to talk about that stuff. Okay, the biggest headline from that during the many media availabilities during the All-Star weekend, Sidney Crosby was asked about the current playoff format in place, and he let us know that he doesn't like it, and he feels that going to a 1-8 playoff format would reward teams better. Mikey Stevens was the one who kind of tweeted that out first. I'm sure it was a scrum, but Mikey Stevens got that out, so I will give him the stick tap for that. And of course, naturally, discussion ensues after Sidney Crosby, one of the faces of our game, one of the best players of our generation, says something. Like, that's one of those things you should take notice of. And Gordon Miller went on Twitter, and he mentioned that the 1-8 format works with how the current scheduling is done, in which teams play to other teams for the other conference at least twice, teams in their own conference 3 or 4 times, teams in their own division 3 times. But if we get to a point where we might have to change that format, or at least if there's a proposal in place to change the number of games, adding 2 more, and maybe changing the schedule, how does that work with the playoff format? There's a lot to get to with this, but where do you stand?
Yeah, but let's cut through it. There's a lot, but it's simple. The players don't like it. The guys that are playing the game are actually speaking out about it. It wasn't just Sidney Crosby. Nathan McKinnon, without being asked specifically about the Atlantic Division, said the Toronto-Tampa thing is silly.
Wow.
And he wasn't asked, like, hey, do you think how does this affect the Leafs, Nathan? Like, he was like, it doesn't make sense. You could be the second best team in your conference and play the third best team in your conference in round 1. He actually referenced St. Louis and Minnesota from last year as well, that there was one of those type of discrepancies there. And a number of other players that don't have the name or star power of Crosby and McKinnon also said that they'd like to see 1-8 again, and they don't like the divisional format. I think, it's funny. It's one of these things where the league doesn't see an issue. I think a lot of people watching the league see an issue. Obviously, the players that are playing the game see an issue. I actually think that this could be the start of where a change happens, honestly. I asked Gary Bettman and Bill Daly about it when they were available on Saturday. And one of the things Bill Daly said, like, this isn't a burning issue. He said, when we polled general managers 2 years ago, 2/3 of them said they liked the divisional playoff format. But it becomes a burning issue when someone like Sidney Crosby, and he didn't take a hard stand. He just said, I don't think it's the most fair way to do it. It's all tied together, though. And that's sort of, I think, Gord Miller's broader point. I read through his 28-page Twitter screed there. But essentially, if you're changing the playoff format, you have to be mindful of what, that you have some sort of fair and balanced schedule that makes sense. You want to make sure you are measuring the right things when you do that, and that each team is somewhat fair. But it doesn't feel right how often every single year in round 1 or round 2 you have 2 of the absolute best teams in the league playing. I guess it's exciting because those individual series tend to be pretty good, but why have teams play 82 games? There's a certain amount of inertia in the system now, right? You look at the Atlantic as the current best example of it, but it's hard to imagine any scenario where it's not either Boston, Toronto, Tampa, or Boston, Tampa, Toronto in terms of the 1, 2, 3 in that division. And what that means for the playoff matchup, of course, Boston's going to play a wild card team likely as the division champion, but the 2-3 is already locked in. I just don't think it's that interesting. I mean, the series, Toronto Tampa might play a great series, but that's not really what's at issue here. I think it's whether it's fair. There's less reason for those teams to put the pedal down either. They're just kind of stuck with each other. The only thing they're wrestling for is which team plays game 1 at home and a potential game 7 at home. That's about the only thing at issue right now. So, I don't know where it goes next. I think obviously the general managers meeting will be in March. That's the place where rule changes happen. Gary Bettman mentioned the competition committee. We'll discuss this too. So maybe we just start to see if the public comments change, if some of the sentiment behind the scenes changes. But, I can't imagine the league wants players, especially players like Sidney Crosby or Nathan McKinnon, openly questioning the playoff format. I mean, maybe they'll stick to their guns. I don't know. It seems to me like this is the start. Change doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but we might look back at this as okay, enough is enough. We've got to shift this.
Yeah, that's how I see it. It's one thing if a lesser known player says something, but when you have Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon, 2 of the best players in the National Hockey League, saying something about this, if the NHL sticks to its guns, then wow, the players really don't have a voice or a say in how things are run. That would be really disappointing.
Well, and Gary Bettman said he values their opinion. Let's see, right? I mean, as I say, I don't. What is interesting too, I don't know if you saw this, Joe, in The Athletic, your colleagues there did kind of an unofficial poll of players, and very few players were in favor of a play-in, because we have talked about that as a potential change to the playoff format. So, if that's the case, because I've thought the play-in made sense, if only because it's something exciting to sell. It's dramatic. It's a new TV property, so to speak, built into the calendar. I'm looking at it from that way. But so maybe the solution is just going back to what we had, not so long ago, 10 years ago. 1-8 was how it was done in each conference. I mean, maybe that's what happens. But I do think this could be a turning point early turning point kind of moment. Like, I appreciate what Bill Daly's saying. This isn't a burning issue, meaning I think at the league level, they're not discussing this every day. They're not debating this, but maybe they're going to be forced into that discussion or debate, by the players putting their voice to this opinion.
Yep. Let's wait and see about how that will go. I want to get to another story that broke out yesterday. And we wanted to originally do a trading pile segment, but we realized there's some teams that are kind of doing some things with their cap space, whether it's signing players or putting players on LTIR. And maybe less so in the case of the Islanders. But if you look at what the Carolina Hurricanes are looking like in the Vegas Golden Knights, maybe that puts them in a position where they can get some players who have been on our trading pile. So we're going to kind of condense the trading pile and the segment that I wanted to do called Cap Space and kind of do some kind of weird mashup of the two. But let's start off with the New York Islanders first, because Bo Horvat gets traded, plays for the Pacific Division while wearing the Islanders patches and still gets to do his moment with Elias Pettersson, but he signs an 8-year deal worth $8.5 million over the weekend. What are your impressions of the deal, Bo Horvat, and his weekend?
So the hockey world stopped and nothing else happened except that Bo Horvat's life got turned upside down, right? I mean, did anyone have a more surreal week than him? He's on vacation with his family at Disney World or in Florida, gets traded, Monday from Vancouver to the Islanders, goes to the All-Star game, pulls on an Islanders sweater with a new number 14 for the first time in participation in the skills competition, has his goodbye moment, so to speak, with Elias Pettersson, his longtime teammate with the Canucks, and then signs a massive extension before ever making his NHL debut with the Islanders. That happens Monday night in Philadelphia. So what a strange week. I think it's a great week for Bo Horvat. At the end of the day, his contract is a screaming home run for him personally and his family, I believe. I mean, $8.5 million times 8. Vancouver wasn't willing to go anywhere near those kind of numbers when they talked last summer and again in December about what a new deal might look like. Obviously, Bo Horvat is sacrificing the opportunity and ability to go to free agency on July 1st. But you have to remember, if he went to July 1st, he could only sign a 7-year deal. And to get $68 million on a 7-year deal, you got to get pretty close to $10 million a year, slightly under, hair under, right? 9 point something. I don't think that would have been out there for him, even as great as the season he's having. And so he has maximized his earning power. With this, he bet on himself too, right? I mean, it was not an easy year for him to not extend with the Canucks last summer. He sees his teammate at the time, JT Miller, extended just prior to training camp. He's subject to all these trade rumors and everything going on, but he bet on himself. He's having a massive season with 31 goals already, heading into the sort of unofficial second half here out of the All-Star break. And now he's got security. So, he really had the Islanders. I think he had a lot of leverage in this negotiation because Lou Lamoriello makes that trade. He gives up a first-round pick and a decent prospect and Aatu Ratu, plus a player in Anthony Beauvillier. But he says to Bo Horvat when that trade happens, like, this is not a rental in my mind. Well, I mean, Lou hands over some leverage when he says that to him too, right? I mean, I think it's a good spot to be in, put it that way, if you're Horvat, because you know that they really want to sign you and that they feel like they gave up a lot, especially if you're only a rental. And so he gets a good contract out of it. No signing bonuses, but $68 million, man. That's a nice way to cap a crazy week.
It's too long and it's too much money. That sentence could be something I might say. If you had an opinion on the contract, you might say that. If we were to listen to the Steve Dangle podcast, maybe one of those 3 guys on that show would say that line. It's too long and it's too much money is a quote that can be attributed to Lou Lamoriello himself.
Hours after finishing negotiations with Pat Morris, right? I mean,
what?
Well, it's honest, and he's probably right. And I don't say that as a slight on Bo Horvat. Right, you're only worth what the market says you're worth, right? And Bo Horvat was in a really great spot. I mean, first of all, he's having a career season. He gets traded, and so the Islanders have given up, a fair amount in their view. Like, they feel like they need to maximize their window with him. And if you're Horvat, you don't have to do anything, right? He didn't even have to negotiate. He could say, "Yeah, I'll come to Long Island. I'll play it this season, but then we'll see where we're at." And so there was a lot of pressure on the Islanders. And I think anytime you're signing an 8-year deal with a player that's 27, it is too long. That doesn't mean Horvat can't perform up to the level of this contract. Like, it is possible, but 8 years in pro sports when you're already multiple years into a career is a lifetime, right? I mean, injuries and all kinds of things can happen. And Bo Horvat has been a 60-point player, give or take, throughout his career. I mean, this year he's popping big. He's already at 54 points. So he's going to be probably 70-plus point player this season, and that might be modest. Maybe it ends up even higher than that. But the point is that they're making a fairly big bet on someone who's having the best season of his life by production anyway. And yeah, I think that there's every opportunity 3 years down the road. We're looking back and just going like, oh, wow, that's a tough deal. But, the flip side of that, of course, is if the cap rises a lot and, $8.5 million might not look like so much. So that's the gamble both sides take. You can understand as a player why you want that security, because that's a pretty nice guarantee for you, more or less. Obviously there can be buyouts and things like that, but for the most part, this is a great deal for the player, and the team didn't feel great about it, but they did what they felt they had to do, right? I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah, I can't imagine how Lou Lamoriello is going to feel on this Monday, where there's nothing to talk about in New York sports media, and everyone's going to talk about that deal. There's nothing that happened immediately after that trade that would take attention away from Bo Horvat signing. There's absolutely nothing.
Wasn't it like minutes after that deal went down?
Minutes after, legit minutes after Kyrie Irving gets traded to Dallas.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll tell you this much. I would love to one time be in a situation where the person that signs me to a deal says it's too long and it's too much money. I would love to be on the other side of that negotiation. Like because I was anticipating you might ask me that. Like, how's Bo Horvat going to feel about hearing that? It's like, well, that you feel great. You feel like your agent did his job. You feel like you've maximized your earning window and what you could do. I mean, I'd love someone to say that we've signed CJ for too long and too much money.
Well, it's probably going to be Adam Wilde at this point. And you're worth every penny for what it's worth. So
I'd love that. I'd love that.
Of course. Speaking of money, the trading pile / teams possibly working in LTIR. Let's deal with one that absolutely is in the Carolina Hurricanes. And the fact that they have Max Pacioretty on LTIR. I checked on Cap Friendly last night, and it looks like for the deadline, they have a stupid amount of cap space, over 10 million. I think once we talked about the Canes, I kind of did the little like cough thing and said Timo Meier. But is there another player you might envision seeing on that team? I mean, either Meier or somebody else?
Well, I almost wish we had like a ditty, like a little intro would be like cap space, because I feel like cap space is like a central character in this trade deadline, right? Because
cap space.
Because so many of the teams that have ambition, that want to be aggressive, don't really have much cap space, and so it gets repetitive because we focus on that. Well, now we get to focus on a couple teams that have some significant cap space, and Carolina was already in a good spot vis-a-vis the cap. They weren't completely at the ceiling this season, but with Max Pacioretty, being done for the year after having a second Achilles surgery, they can kind of do anything, within reason. They can fit in anyone. So yeah, Timo Meier, they definitely like. I'm not sure though that they're not that sort of team. Like, I don't see them giving up the assets it takes if he's not signing some kind of extension. Like, I don't see them going all in there. They're in a good spot. First of all, they're a smart team, a smart front office. I think they'll be cagey about it, but both them and now Vegas, let's lump them together.
Yeah.
Because it does, there's no timetable provided by the Golden Knights on Mark Stone following, back surgery, which was announced over All-Star weekend. But I think it's reasonable to think that his regular season at minimum is done. All of a sudden that's how a team that has cap space. And where maybe we draw a line between the Golden Knights and the Hurricanes. The Golden Knights, they love hitting home runs, right? Like they like the 12, like the bold headline moves, whether it's the biggest free agent, some of the biggest trades. They were in on Carlson. They didn't get him. They traded for Mark Stone. Pacioretty move, the Pietrangelo signing as a free agent. Like, they go for the big ones. So, are they going to try to talk about Patrick Kane or, I don't know where they specifically go, but certainly I would expect that they're going to add a forward. I would have said that even with a healthy Mark Stone, that would have been part of their ambition. Same with Carolina, frankly. I think that it's pretty clear that they can use help with a player that can help them put the puck in the net. And so now all of a sudden we have two teams that I would put in the buyer's pile that actually have the thing that a lot of the other contenders don't have too much of. I mean, there's some exceptions. There are, Winnipeg, for example, is a team that's really well positioned for the cap. The Jets could get aggressive. That's not really been in their nature, but they have the ability to, because there's like all this talk about Boston these days, Julian.
Yeah.
Boston just doesn't have the moves. Like, we know Don Sweeney every year is making big moves himself. We can see that they're on this historic run. Like, I can understand why, people want to connect them. Like, I think they were in to some degree on board Horvat. They were certainly interested in him, but I just don't know how the math could have ever really worked on that deal in an easy manner. Ultimately, of course, he ends up on Long Island. But, we have a few marquee forwards. Got Timo Meier, Ryan O'Reilly, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, maybe Jonathan Taves. Who's going to step up and really make a play for these guys? I mean, that will be interesting to me, because there's a drop off after that, right? I mean, the other players that are on the market, we'll just stick to forward for the purpose of this, because Carolina and Vegas are two of those teams. It starts to fall off, right? I mean, with respect, the other names, it's like Sam Lafferty, at this point, Sean Monahan, but he hasn't played a game in 2 months, and we don't really know what's going on there with his injury. Guys like Max Domi, I guess maybe now, Jesse Puljujarvi, and just, James Van Riemsdyk, with a big cap hit, but maybe towards the end of his career where it's tougher for him to perform to that cap. Like,
hold that thought on James Van Riemsdyk. I'll ask him
but there's
about that.
definitely fair, but there's definitely a drop off, right? I mean, there's a few players that you could see, like Tarasenko has just done nothing but score his whole career, and he's a big man, can play in the playoffs, can help your power play. Like, teams looking for goals have to look at him. He's got a no trade clause too, so he's got control there. I actually spoke with him a little bit, asked him a few questions during the All-Star Media Day, and he kind of acknowledged, like, he feels like his time, he's 700 games in with the Blues, 700 plus games, and he feels like it's sort of potentially winding down here. He said there's a lot going on, like, there's a few impact difference type makers, and only so many places where they could go. So, those are two big developments, I think. I mean, Pacioretty, we obviously knew unfortunately, pretty much from the day it happened, that his season was done. But the fact he's formally been placed in LTI opens up that room in Carolina. And now this Mark Stone development in the last few days puts Vegas in a different degree of trade conversations than they could have been if he was healthy.
Absolutely. James Van Riemsdyk I want to focus on, because I noticed his name kick around a lot in the last few days. I'm intrigued by his name, particularly because of the fact that he's been linked to the market I am currently based in Calgary. And I wasn't sure if he would be a player that the Flames would be interested in, but he is also a player who is able to get in front of the net, which they need. He's arguably been one of the best net front tippers pretty much over the last 10, 15 years. But he has that massive cap hit, and there's a notable former teammate of his who plays on the Calgary Flames as well, Nazem Kadri. What do you feel about that dossier?
I just don't know if he's going to be traded. I think he's at the stage of his career he'd like to be traded. We know Philadelphia is not going anywhere. He's into his 30s. He only gets so many chances to lift the mug. So I think that this is a move he'd like to see happen. I think Philadelphia would retain some cap space in a deal. What's interesting is his actual money owing on his contract is actually quite low. It was a front-loaded contract to structure. So it's not a case of actual dollars. It's just the cap room is a challenge. It's a $7 million cap hit. So I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, But I have it at, say, like 60-40 likelihood he's moved. Maybe a little higher, 70-30. I mean, James Van Riemsdyk's an absolute pro, looks after himself. You know, if you look at John Tortorella's comments this year, he's talked extensively about the mentorship role that Van Riemsdyk's filled with his younger teammates. Like, you know, I don't think you'll find anyone saying a bad word about him. And he's actually been reasonably productive. He missed time in December with a hand injury, but he's returned and on a Flyers team that isn't that great. He's putting up fair numbers. So I think he can help someone. And I do think, let's fast forward to July 1st. Absolutely, he's going to have interest July 1st when he's signing for a more bargain type of deal, because I think he's a veteran that can help a team. It's just be interesting to see how everything shakes out here at the deadline. I like the fit with Calgary. I mean, look, they're looking for, as you know, someone to help out their forward group. Definitely someone who can help contribute at the power play, just sick hands around the net. But you know, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out, because maybe more teams end up with the cap space. Then he moves, right? But if not, there's other options that are cheaper or just like easier to fit in certain situations. So let's watch how that one develops. I'll tell you this: it's not 100% in my mind he's dealt, just because of the stupid hard cap league at times. Like, they're just, in another world, of course he's dealt, but it's just, you know, if you're getting him, there's opportunity costs. It means you can't get somebody else.
I love the fact that cap space is a thing now.
I don't know. You got to keep it interesting, bud.
Well, of course. Speaking of keeping,
you know what we didn't talk about?
What did we not talk about?
Gustav Nyquist. And
yeah,
what's interesting about him is he suffered a shoulder injury. Columbus Blue Jackets player, expiring contract. You know, he's been on CJ's trade deadline big board, and he suffers with a shoulder injury. Doesn't need surgery, but he suffered the injury 11 weeks from the end of the regular season. I think he's been given sort of a 10 to 12 week window. And you say, oh, that's terrible. I mean, he's maybe not going to be able to play the rest of the regular season. They're not going to be able to trade him. But ironically, I think it makes him more tradable, because of all the teams that don't have enough of a number of them are in LTI already. There's an opportunity potentially to trade for Nyquist, put him on LTI, and stash him there till the playoffs, and not negatively impact your cap position. And there's a whole bunch of teams that are good that could at least look at doing that. Teams like Toronto and Colorado and Boston. I think Washington. Anyway, there's a few teams where this could make sense. And so as we get closer to March 3rd, and I think there's a clear timeline on Nyquist, that's something to keep an eye out for, because, you know, a team like the Leafs, as an example, could trade for Nyquist.
As an example.
Yes, I'm not saying they're going to, but as an example, they could trade for Nyquist, put Austin Matthews on LTI, because Austin's out right now with a knee sprain, and then you know, stash Nyquist on, use the space to put Nyquist on LTI there with him. When Austin's healthy to return, because he's not done for the regular season, you activate him, and the Leafs are in no worse or no different of a cap position they would have been anyway. And so obviously there's a potential acquisition cost there. There's some risk, because you're acquiring a player who's you can't activate until the start of the playoffs, meaning he doesn't get to play with your team at all. Who knows how that's going to fit? But it's at least something to consider and to look out for. It's I wouldn't call it a loophole, but it's just kind of something interesting that's come up. It actually happened a couple of years ago with Riley Nash. Ironically, from Columbus, was traded to Toronto. He didn't end up playing a lot in that playoffs. I can't say it worked out, but it's something that has been done in the past. And, you know, I do know for sure Nyquist really wants to be traded to a contender. Like, again, he's in a similar spot to James Van Riemsdyk. He just wants a chance to win a cup, play on a good team, be part of a playoff run. He wants to get healthy. Like, it's not like he's working to get back because he thinks he's going to play another game or more this season. And so, you know, maybe we see him traded somewhere and put on LTI and activated for the start of the playoffs. Pretty interesting kind of scenario.
Very interesting scenario. And I should have added Gustav Nyquist to my rundown. But I'm actually glad we got to that. All these different scenarios in that. What if you like add him and you stash him and it brings up the LTIR number? And couldn't that, in theory, if you were a team that were able to afford getting him in the first place and you put him on LTIR, put you in a position to get somebody else maybe? Or am I thinking
yes.
too far? Yeah, exactly.
No, that's exactly it. So, like, again, I'll use the Leafs situation. They could acquire him, put him on LTIR, and still make another move.
Yep.
And I should be clear, I don't have any firm knowledge that the Leafs are going to do this. It's just, it's easy to use that hypothetical scenario that's all of a sudden emerged. And so in a world where Nyquist was just healthy and didn't suffer the shoulder injury, I would say he's sort of in the Van Riemsdyk camp. He makes $5.5 million. A team may or may not trade for that. I think there's a lot to like in the player, but there's other cheaper players out there. There's Max Domi, for example, potentially being moved by Chicago at half the price. So, and he's younger. Like a team that's acquiring someone might look differently at it. But I think now that he's injured and may not be back until really when the playoffs are starting, that could actually work in his favor in terms of landing on a contender.
Okay. Think you know what way it's going to go? Make your bet at Sports Interaction. Whether it's hockey, basketball, or one of the biggest days in sports, Super Bowl 57. Get the action at Sports Interaction. Bet pregame, live in play, or on one of our many prop bets. Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN, or in Ontario, download the app using the QR code on your screen. 19 and over, please play responsibly. Let's get to Ask CJ. We got a couple questions here for you as we wrap up the Monday edition of the CJ Show. Let's start from one from a Dill Pickle on Discord. For CJ and JM, regarding the trade deadline, do you fall on the side of get the trade done early to get ahead of the market, or wait as long as possible to get a read on the market and get caught up in the pressure of a deadline? So early or late?
It depends which side of the bet you're on. I think if you're a buyer and you're not a buyer, the Islanders were desperate, right? The Islanders haven't scored in like a month. They've lost a ton of games heading into the break. Like, I can see why they. And the other thing is that the Canucks really wanted to move Horvat. Like, I think they understood that this was the time, and so I can see why they just stepped up and did it, because for them they need to win games literally starting Monday, as we had it here out of the All-Star break. They need to try to climb back into playoff position. But I think if you're a buyer and you're comfortably in, if you're Boston or any of the teams at the top of the league that know they're going to make the playoffs, I think it generally helps to wait it out and let some teams overpay for the first items off the shelf. And so I would say, generally speaking, and sometimes the conditions are different, if I'm selling, I'd like to get out ahead of the market, because I think there's real risk of selling that you get to the last day or even last afternoon, the last couple hours before the deadline passes, and you just don't have many buyers left, and you've only got poor offers on the table. I think it's way better to set your price and just go get it. Maybe even concede a little bit to get it done. I think if you're buying, generally speaking, it makes sense to wait until close to the end, because often the prices come down. You see Ben Sherratt go for a first, and then a lot of defensemen that maybe aren't all that different than him go for a second or third or fourth, because those deals are made afterwards, and there's just not that many first round picks on the table. So anyway, it's negotiations. There's an art to it too. And like, obviously there's discussions already happening now, but I think a lot of it's like, oh, you want this fourth liner on my team? Well, you have to pay this, and this, and this, and this. But then the truth is, we all know, as March 3rd comes, you probably just want to move your fourth liner if your team going nowhere. So I think it's hard to get two teams that are really serious in the same moment this far out to make a deal. But it's happened once. We saw another trade with Jacob Magna on Sunday night. That's a depth defenseman, though, being traded to Seattle for a fourth. So maybe we're starting to see some things shake loose.
I feel like I'm on the opposite side, only because if I'm, especially now with how cap space is being used, if I'm in a position where I could max out as much cap space as possible and put myself in a position where I can get a player who could fit there, I want to consider that. And it's like, again, especially in the context of now, where a lot of teams are hamstrung by that problem. Yes, there are teams that might want to go in a little early, but if that means I have to kind of get thrown in with everybody else, and I know I have the space, and I definitely know if I'm a team that has that space, I feel confident enough, regardless, that I'm able to handle whatever price I could deal with. That's how I feel about that. Rolling through these a bit quickly here from Insider J Money. Hello, my noble heroes of the hockey Twitter world. Thank you for the compliment. For Ask CJ this week, my question is with PWHPA players being involved with the All-Star game this weekend. Where do you think that you two as writers and insiders can help in increasing the visibility of the women's game?
I guess by writing and talking about it. You know, like, and I'm not being sarcastic. I think the best way, to me, what's kind of cool is you see the evolution back to San Jose All-Star when, of course, you have Kendall Coyne Schofield, rip around and have that lap, and it gets so much attention, rightfully so. Don't get me wrong. But it was sort of a novelty that the female players were involved. Well, now it wasn't a novelty, right? Like, no one didn't seem weird. It didn't seem like a sideshow. You see the comfort level, even with the players interacting with the 5 women that were part of the skills competition. Like, I think continued inclusion, obviously, maybe we need to carve out more of a space on our pod to talk about the comings and goings of the women's game. I think that's the way it happens. But I do think it's heading in a pretty good direction. I think that it's funny. Like, I had some talks with people like offline at the All-Star weekend. Like, there is more money out there now for the players. And I do think the visibility will come. Honestly, I think that we're on our way. But I mean, if specifically us, let's talk about it a little bit more, Julian. Maybe we have to be more cognizant of some of the storylines and goings on the women's side of the game too.
Absolutely. I'm all for that, especially considering that the game is at points where they're trying to bump up salaries, and that's being more and more public. Like, I think those are really intriguing storylines, or if any partnerships go on, or if there's any discussions about any more of those Dream Gap tours or league changes or notable players going from one league to another. I think if we're able to hop on those types of stories, that would be really great. And I think it'd be really relevant to what we talk about as a hockey podcast. And I think a lot of people who listen to the show would appreciate it. And maybe it invites more fans as well. That's an idea.
Absolutely.
Last one for you real quick here. Hi, CJ and JM. This is from Dr. Sun on Discord. Last week, the SDP went over the Bachelor bios. What would your bios and fun facts be if you were contestants on the Bachelorette? And most importantly, from which member of the SDP would you think would get the best rating?
I don't know anything about The Bachelor.
Have you never watched it? Do you understand the premise?
Yeah, I understand I know, like, a bunch of people go live at a house and, like, yeah, but I don't know. I've never really watched it, so I don't know. Like, is it just normal bios, or is it just like CJ likes long walks on the beach and?
Yeah, something like a mash of normal /
CJ likes a romantic coffee in the morning, followed by a run, followed by a long walk on the beach. Like, I don't know what my bio would be.
I think it might be that. I don't know about the second part of the question. I honestly didn't get to that episode of the SDP. Sorry. But like, yeah, in terms of bios, I mean, for me, like, I like a nice chamomile or chai tea in the morning. That's pretty nice. That's pretty romantic for me. We're both workaholics, clearly.
No.
Yes,
this isn't work. This isn't work.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know, man. Just both. Well, you're a short king.
Yeah. So are you.
I'm barely that.
I saw producer Nick in the press box at the All-Star too.
I
can't believe we got this far in the episode and I didn't get to talk about that part of All-Star weekend, like being physically in the same space as producer Nick.
Seriously, I would love to.
He actually was creeping out behind me, taking pictures of me because I didn't notice him at first. Sending it to the group chat, like the back of my head.
I would have done the same thing too. Think of I don't know. Hey, people who find us attractive. We're two handsome, relatively speaking, young men who have great voices. How about that? I'm good with that. I don't know. Someone else should write my.
What kind of stuff? So here's the thing, because I'm so old, essentially. I actually I missed the whole Tinder / dating app thing. So I'm not being funny about this. Like, I don't know what you put on those bios. I'm not sure. Are you supposed to be like, CJ loves to travel because I love to travel? I guess maybe that's the kind of stuff you put on there. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not writing in anything from those. Nope, this is not the show for that. Nope.
Well, I just assume, being just your generation, you're a little more familiar with how that all goes down on there. So. Oh,
absolutely. But this is not the show for that. Absolutely not. We're not doing that. Let's not.
Come on, you can.
No.
Come on, Julian. You can say something here.
Not expose either of ourselves in our current situations. Absolutely not. No, we not do it. We can't go that far. We can't go that far. I don't want this to be the CJ show / Bachelor pod. I don't want that. Absolutely not.
All right.
And
Well,
I mean
CJ
more me
loves
than you, obviously.
CJ loves long runs on the beach and travel and hockey and good taste in wine.
Yeah, good food, good sports, good jokes, good times, and
Good
shoes.
player.
Love shoes. Good player. Good player. Good person. Now that's a great Daryl Sutter impersonation. Good job. Okay, we got to roll.
Let's wrap this.
Let's do this before we,
because we're dangerously close to saying something we don't want to say.
Absolutely not. Thursday we'll be back with Stick Taps. Subscribe to the podcast however you listen to the podcast, and we'll be back very soon. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JKMcKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.